The storm. The blizzard hit Pine Hollow like an avalanche of ice and fury. Jack Monroe gripped the steering wheel of his aging pickup truck, squinting through the windshield as snow whipped across the headlights in violent spirals. The two-lane mountain road had become a treacherous ribbon of white, barely visible beneath the storm's rage. "Daddy, are we going to make it home?" 9-year-old Gracie asked from the passenger seat, her small hands wrapped around a thermos of hot cocoa. Her voice carried the kind of worry that children try to hide but never quite manage. Jack glanced at his daughter and forced a reassuring smile. "Of course we are, Bug. Just a few more miles and we'll be warm by the fire." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. This wasn't just a snowstorm, it was a whiteout, the kind that swallowed cars whole and left them buried until spring. He should have left town earlier, before the weather turned vicious. Now they were crawling through nature's tantrum at 15 miles per hour, praying the road wouldn't disappear beneath them. That's when Gracie gasped, pointing toward the side of the road. "Daddy, look!" At first, Jack thought it was just another snow drift, another trick of the storm playing with his tired eyes. But as his headlights swept across the broken guardrail of the old mill bridge, he saw it, a figure slumped against the metal barrier, barely visible against the white chaos. His heart lurched. "Jesus," he whispered, hitting the brakes. The truck skidded sideways before grinding to a stop 20 feet past the bridge. "Stay in the truck," Jack commanded, already throwing open his door. The wind hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and stinging his face with needles of ice. He stumbled through the knee-deep snow, his boots crunching with each desperate step. She was young, maybe early 20s, curled in a fetal position beneath the twisted guardrail. Her clothes, thin jeans and a cotton sweater, were soaked through and already beginning to freeze. Her dark hair was matted against her pale face, and when Jack knelt beside her, he could see her lips had turned a frightening shade of blue. "Hey, can you hear me?" he called over the howling wind, gently touching her shoulder. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open, green eyes, wild and unfocused, filled with a terror that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the cold. Her lips moved, forming words he could barely hear above the storm. "Don't let them find me," she whispered, her voice broken and raw. Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. Jack didn't hesitate. He lifted her from the snow, surprised by how light she felt, how fragile. She couldn't weigh more than 100 pounds soaking wet, which she literally was. As he carried her toward the truck, he noticed something glinting at her throat, a silver locket on a thin chain, somehow untouched by the storm. "Is she dead?" Gracie asked in a small voice as Jack laid the unconscious woman across the back seat. "No, but she's in bad shape," Jack replied, cranking the heater to maximum. He grabbed the emergency blankets from behind the seat and wrapped them around the stranger. "We need to get her warm, fast." The drive home took another 20 minutes of white-knuckle driving, but Jack's modest house had never looked more welcoming. Smoke drifted from the chimney, and golden light spilled from the windows onto the snow-covered yard. It was humble, a one-story fixer-upper that Jack had been renovating for years, but it was warm and safe. He carried the woman inside and laid her on the couch near the fireplace. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and slowly, color began to return to her cheeks. Gracie hovered nearby, watching with the solemn intensity of a child who understood that something important was happening. "Will she be okay?" Gracie whispered. Jack knelt by the fire, adding another log to the flames. "I think so. She just needs to warm up and rest." Hours passed. The storm gradually quieted outside, leaving the world blanketed in pristine white. The woman slept deeply, occasionally murmuring in her sleep, fragments of words that made no sense. Jack sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to process what had happened. Who was she? How had she ended up half frozen by that bridge in the middle of nowhere? And why had she begged him not to let them find her? As dawn broke over Pine Hollow, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, the woman finally stirred. Jack heard the rustle of blankets and found her sitting up on the couch, looking around his living room with confused, frightened eyes. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "You're safe," Jack said gently, sitting in the chair across from her. "I'm Jack Monroe. This is my daughter, Gracie. We found you by the old bridge last night during the storm." She touched her forehead, wincing. I can't remember how I got there." Her voice cracked with panic. "I can't remember anything." Gracie stepped forward, shy but determined. "What's your name?" The woman stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know who I am." Jack felt his chest tighten. Amnesia was serious, usually caused by trauma, physical or emotional. This woman had clearly been through something terrible. "Can we call her Ellie?" Gracie suggested quietly. "She looks like an Ellie." The woman turned to his daughter, and for the first time since Jack had found her, she smiled. It was faint and uncertain, but it reached her eyes. "I like that," she whispered. "Ellie." As Jack made breakfast and listened to Ellie try to piece together fragments of memory, snow, running, voices shouting, he couldn't shake the feeling that finding her hadn't been an accident. In a town like Pine Hollow, where nothing ever happened, stumbling across a mysterious woman with no memory felt like the beginning of something much bigger than a simple rescue. He just had no idea how big. Fragments of the past. 3 days had passed since the storm, and Ellie had begun to settle into the rhythm of Jack's quiet household. She helped with small tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, reading to Gracie before bed, as if keeping busy might somehow jar loose the memories that remained stubbornly locked away. But the nightmares came every night. She would wake gasping, her heart pounding with images she couldn't quite grasp, a grand staircase, marble floors reflecting flames, a man's voice calling her name. Always, there was the smell of smoke and the sound of her own footsteps echoing as she ran. On Thursday morning, Jack found her sitting at the kitchen table before dawn, staring at the silver locket she never took off. "Couldn't sleep again?" he asked gently, pouring coffee for both of them. Ellie shook her head. "I keep seeing the same house in my dreams. It's huge, elegant. But something terrible happened there." She opened the locket, revealing the photo inside, a little girl with pigtails and a woman with soft blonde curls, both smiling at the camera. "I think this might be my mother." Jack sat beside her, studying the photograph. The woman looked young, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes and an expensive haircut. The little girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "What about the engraving?" Ellie turned the locket over, revealing the faint inscription on the back, "To my darling M, love Mom." M, Jack repeated thoughtfully. Could be short for Emily. Maybe. Ellie closed the locket with trembling fingers. "But Emily who? And why can't I remember her face?" That afternoon, Jack had to drive to town for supplies. Ellie asked to come along, hoping that seeing other people and places might trigger something. Pine Hollow's main street was a collection of weathered storefronts and local businesses that looked like they'd been frozen in time since the 1980s. They stopped at Murphy's General Store, where Jack chatted with old Mrs. Murphy about the storm damage while Ellie wandered the aisles. She was examining a rack of local newspapers when something made her freeze. The Pine Hollow Gazette's front page featured a small article about the blizzard, but it was the adjacent story that caught her attention: "Seattle Cold Case Receives New Tip." Below the headline was a photograph, a digitally age-progressed image of a young woman with dark hair and solemn eyes. Ellie's hands began to shake. The face in the photo looked exactly like the one she saw in the mirror every morning. "Jack," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, come here." He appeared at her side, taking one look at the newspaper before his face went pale. The article was brief: "Authorities confirm a new tip has surfaced regarding Emily Halberg, the billionaire heiress who vanished after a tragic fire in 2004. The child, then 5 years old, was presumed dead when her parents' Seattle mansion burned to the ground. However, recent evidence suggests she may have survived. "That's you," Jack said quietly. "Isn't it?" Ellie couldn't speak. She stared at the age-progressed photo, at the name Emily Halberg, at the mention of a fire in 2004. Suddenly, the fragments in her dreams began to make terrible sense. They bought the newspaper and drove home in silence. Once Gracie was occupied with her homework, Jack and Ellie sat at the kitchen table with the article spread between them. "Emily Halberg," Ellie said the name slowly, testing how it felt. "Why doesn't it sound familiar?" "Maybe because you've been someone else for 20 years, Jack suggested. "If you survived that fire, someone took you. Someone who didn't want you to remember who you were." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. A 5-year-old girl doesn't just disappear from a burning mansion. Her parents were billionaires, they would have had security, staff, investigators. "Unless," Jack said carefully, "the person who took you was someone they trusted. Someone who had access." That evening, while Gracie watched cartoons in the living room, Jack made a phone call to his old friend Ray Turlock, a retired Seattle police detective. Ray had worked cold cases for 30 years before moving to Oregon, and Jack hoped he might remember something about the Halberg fire. "Jack, you old bastard," Ray's voice boomed through the phone. "What's got you calling me on a Thursday night? I need to ask you about a case from 2004. The Halberg family fire in Seattle." There was a long pause. "Why would you be asking about that?" Jack hesitated. "Because I think I found Emily Halberg. She's alive, Ray, and she's been living as someone else for 20 years. Another pause, longer this time. "Jesus, Jack. Where are you right now?" "Pine Hollow. She's staying with me and Gracie." "Listen to me very carefully," Ray's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "That case was never just about a house fire. Richard and Patricia Halberg were about to expose massive financial crimes, embezzlement, fraud, connections to some very dangerous people. The fire wasn't an accident." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying they were murdered?" "I'm saying the official report concluded it was an electrical fire, but there were too many inconsistencies. The bodies were burned beyond recognition, but the forensics team found accelerant traces that never made it into the final report. And the little girl's body was never found, despite what the newspapers said. So what happened to her? If I had to guess, someone took her to keep her quiet. Maybe they thought she saw something, or maybe they wanted leverage over the family fortune. But Jack, if you really have Emily Halberg, you need to be very careful. People killed her parents to keep secrets buried. They won't hesitate to do it again." After hanging up, Jack found Ellie standing by the window, watching snow begin to fall again. She looked small and vulnerable in his oversized flannel shirt, but there was something different in her posture, a straightening of her spine, as if some inner strength was finally awakening. "I heard part of your conversation," she said without turning around. "My parents were murdered, weren't they?" Jack moved to stand beside her. "It looks that way. And someone's been keeping me prisoner for 20 years, making sure I never remembered." "Ellie." "Emily," she corrected, still staring out at the falling snow. "My name is Emily Halberg. And I think it's time I started remembering everything." That night, Emily's dreams were different. Instead of fragments, she saw clear images: a man in an expensive suit bending down to speak to her in a kind voice, a woman who wasn't her mother but who she called Aunt Sarah, a room with no windows where she was told she had to stay until it was safe to come out. She woke with tears on her cheeks and a name on her lips, Uncle Thomas. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and Emily realized that the real nightmare wasn't in her dreams, it was the life she'd been forced to forget. The House of Secrets. Emily woke with a start, her heart racing. The name Uncle Thomas echoed in her mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. She sat up in bed, pressing her palms against her temples as more memories surfaced, not gentle recollections, but sharp, painful fragments that cut through the fog of her amnesia. Thomas Crane. Her father's business partner and best friend. A man who used to bring her expensive toys and call her Little Princess. A man who had been at the house the night of the fire. She found Jack in the kitchen, already dressed for work. He took one look at her pale face and set down his coffee cup. "You remembered something," he said. It wasn't a question. "Thomas Crane," Emily whispered. "He was my father's business partner. He was supposed to be at a conference in Vancouver the night of the fire, but he was there. I saw him." Jack pulled out a chair for her. "What else do you remember?" Emily sat down, wrapping her arms around herself. "There was an argument. My parents were shouting at him about money, about accounts that were missing. I was supposed to be in bed, but I snuck out to listen from the top of the stairs." She paused, her breathing shallow. "Then there was a loud noise, like glass breaking. I smelled gasoline. I ran back to my room, but the smoke was already coming under the door." "How did you get out?" "Thomas found me. He carried me out through the back entrance, told me we had to hide because bad people were trying to hurt our family." Emily's voice cracked. "I trusted him. I thought he was saving me." Jack's jaw tightened. "But he wasn't." "No. He took me to a house in the mountains. Said it was temporary, that we'd go back to the city when it was safe. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. There was a woman there, Sarah. She was kind but scared. She told me my parents had died in the fire, that I had to stay hidden or the bad people would find me." Emily stood and walked to the window, staring out at the pine trees that surrounded Jack's property. "I was 5 years old. I believed them. And slowly, they made me forget who I was. New name, new story. They told me my parents had abandoned me, that I was lucky Thomas had taken me in." "Jesus," Jack breathed. "How long did they keep you there?" "Years. I remember being 10, maybe 11, when we moved to another house. Then another. Always remote, always isolated. Sarah homeschooled me, but we never talked about my life before. It was like Emily Halberg had never existed." Jack joined her at the window. "When did you realize the truth?" "Last year. I was cleaning out Thomas's office when he was away on business. He still traveled a lot, and I found a box of newspapers. Headlines about the fire, about my parents' deaths, about the missing heiress. I saw my own picture, and everything started coming back." "So you ran?" Emily nodded. "I confronted Sarah first. She broke down, told me everything. How Thomas had embezzled millions from my parents' company, how they'd discovered it and threatened to expose him. How he'd set the fire to destroy the evidence and make it look like an accident. And you were the loose end. A 5-year-old witness who might remember something inconvenient. So he kept me alive but hidden, moving me around like a chess piece whenever he needed to relocate." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "Sarah helped him for 17 years because he threatened to kill me if she didn't comply. She was as much a prisoner as I was." Jack placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Where's Sarah now?" "Dead." Emily's voice was flat. "Thomas found out she told me the truth. He said it was a heart attack, but I know better. That's when I knew I had to disappear completely." "So you've been running for a year. Living off the grid, using fake names, never staying anywhere too long." "I was trying to get to the FBI, to tell someone the truth about what happened to my parents. But Thomas has connections everywhere. I've been to 3 different field offices, and each time, somehow he knew I was there before I could tell my story." Jack felt a chill of understanding. "That's why you were on that bridge in the storm. You were running from him." Emily turned to face him, her green eyes blazing with determination. "I'm tired of running, Jack. I'm tired of being afraid. My parents deserve justice, and I'm the only one who can give it to them. Emily, this man has been hunting you for a year. He's killed to keep his secrets safe. You can't just walk into a police station and expect. I'm not walking into a police station, Emily interrupted. I'm going to his house. Jack stared at her. That's suicide. No, it's the only way. Thomas thinks I'm still that terrified little girl he can control. He doesn't know I've remembered everything. He doesn't know I've been planning this for months. She went to her small bag, the only possessions she had when Jack found her, and pulled out a cell phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I've been recording everything, she said. Every memory that came back, every detail about what happened that night. I've been emailing it to a secure account, building a case. But I need proof. Real evidence. And I know where to find it. Jack's mind raced. Emily, you can't do this alone. I won't be alone. She looked at him with an expression that was both vulnerable and fierce. That is, if you'll help me. Before Jack could respond, Gracie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas and holding her favorite stuffed animal. Emily. Are you okay? You look sad. Emily knelt down to Gracie's level, smoothing the little girl's hair. I'm okay, sweetheart. But I need to take care of something important. Something that's been broken for a long time. Can Daddy help? He's really good at fixing things. Emily looked up at Jack, her eyes pleading. I hope so, Gracie. I really hope so. That afternoon, while Gracie played at a neighbor's house, Jack and Emily drove to the address she'd found in Thomas's files, a sprawling estate in the hills outside Seattle. They parked on a side road and walked through the woods until they could see the house, a modern monstrosity of glass and steel, all sharp angles and cold surfaces. He's not home, Emily said, checking her phone. He's at a board meeting downtown. We have maybe 2 hours. Emily, breaking and entering. It's not breaking and entering if it's my house, she said quietly. According to the will, I inherited everything when I turned 18. Thomas has been managing the estate as my guardian, but legally, this all belongs to me. They approached the house carefully. Emily led Jack around to a side entrance, where she punched a code into a keypad. The door clicked open. How did you know the code? Jack asked. It's my birthday, Emily said with bitter irony. October 15, 2004. The day Emily Halberg was supposed to have died. Inside, the house was as cold and sterile as its exterior. Emily moved through the rooms with purpose, leading Jack to a home office that looked more like a war room. The walls were lined with monitors, filing cabinets, and a massive safe. He keeps everything here, Emily said, pulling out a small device from her pocket. The evidence of what he did to my parents, what he did to me, where he's hidden all the money he stole. She attached the device to Thomas's computer. This will copy everything on his hard drive. But I need you to help me with the safe. Jack looked at the imposing steel door. I'm a contractor, not a safecracker. You don't need to crack it, Emily said, producing a small key from her locket. I've had this the whole time. My mother gave it to me the day she died. She said it was for emergencies. The key fit perfectly. Inside the safe were stacks of documents, photographs, and several hard drives. Emily's hands shook as she pulled out a folder marked, Insurance, Halberg Fire. This is it, she whispered. The real evidence. Photos of the accelerant, witness statements that were never filed, financial records showing the embezzlement. Jack kept watch while Emily photographed everything with her phone. As she worked, he saw her transform before his eyes. The frightened, lost woman he'd rescued from the storm was gone, replaced by someone harder, more determined. Someone who had finally found her purpose. Emily, Jack said urgently. Car in the driveway. She looked up, her face pale. He's early. They heard the front door open, followed by Thomas Crane's voice on the phone. Yes, I'm sure it was her. The facial recognition software picked her up at a gas station outside Pine Hollow. She's close, and she's getting careless. Emily grabbed the remaining documents and hard drives, stuffing them into her bag. Jack took her hand, and together they slipped out the back door just as Thomas's footsteps approached the office. They ran through the woods, branches scratching at their faces, until they reached Jack's truck. As they drove away, Emily clutched the evidence to her chest like a lifeline. "He knows where I am," she said quietly. "He'll come for me." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Let him come. This time, we'll be ready." But as they headed back toward Pine Hollow, neither of them noticed the black sedan that had been following them since they left the estate. Thomas Crane had always been one step ahead, and he wasn't about to let his carefully constructed world crumble because a little girl had finally remembered the truth. The confrontation. The black sedan followed them all the way back to Pine Hollow, maintaining a careful distance but never losing sight of Jack's truck. Emily spotted it first, her heart sinking as she recognized the vehicle from her nightmares of the past year. "He's behind us," she said quietly. "The black Mercedes. Thomas always drives black Mercedes." Jack checked his rearview mirror. "I see it. We're not going home." Instead, he drove to the center of town and pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's General Store. If Thomas wanted a confrontation, it would happen in public, with witnesses around. Emily clutched the bag of evidence tighter. "We should call the police." "With what?" "Everything we have could be dismissed as the ravings of an amnesiac. We need more than documents, we need him to confess." The Mercedes pulled into the lot and parked 2 spaces away. Jack could see the driver clearly now, a man in his 50s with silver hair and cold blue eyes, wearing an expensive suit despite the small-town setting. Thomas Crane looked exactly like what he was, a predator in corporate clothing. "Stay in the truck," Jack said, but Emily was already opening her door. "No. This ends now." Thomas approached them with the confident stride of a man accustomed to getting his way. His smile was warm and paternal, the same expression Emily remembered from her childhood. "Hello, Emma," he said, using the name she'd lived under for 17 years. "You've led me quite a chase." "My name is Emily," she said, standing straighter. "Emily Halberg. And you're going to pay for what you did to my parents." Thomas chuckled, glancing around the nearly empty parking lot. "Such dramatics. Emma, sweetheart, you're confused. You've been having those episodes again, haven't you? The ones where you imagine you're someone else." Jack stepped closer to Emily, recognizing the manipulation immediately. Thomas was gaslighting her, trying to make her doubt her own memories. "She's not confused," Jack said firmly. "She remembers everything. The fire, the embezzlement, how you killed her parents and kidnapped her." Thomas's pleasant expression didn't waver. "And you are someone who's not going to let you hurt her anymore." "Hurt her?" Thomas laughed. "Mr. Monroe. Mr. Monroe, I've spent 20 years caring for this troubled young woman. She suffered severe trauma as a child, her parents died in a house fire, and she barely survived. The experience left her with significant mental health issues. Delusions, false memories, episodes where she believes she's someone else entirely." Emily felt a familiar wave of doubt creep in. Thomas's voice was so reasonable, so convincing. It was the same voice that had shaped her reality for 2 decades. "That's a lie," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Thomas pulled out his phone. "I have doctor's reports, medication records, hospital admissions. Emma has been in my care since she was 5 years old, and I've done everything possible to help her recover. But she keeps running away, creating elaborate fantasies to explain her trauma." Jack saw Emily beginning to waver and stepped forward. "If that's true, then you won't mind explaining how you knew to find her at my house. How you've been tracking her movements for a year." Thomas's smile tightened slightly. I've hired private investigators to find her whenever she disappears. For her own safety. And Sarah? Emily asked, her voice stronger now. What happened to Sarah? For the first time, Thomas's composure cracked slightly. Sarah had a heart attack. Very sad. She'd been under tremendous stress, caring for you all these years. You killed her, Emily said, the certainty returning to her voice. Just like you killed my parents. Thomas sighed and reached into his jacket. Jack tensed, expecting a weapon, but Thomas pulled out a syringe instead. I'm sorry you have to see this, Mr. Monroe, but Emma sometimes requires medication to calm her delusions. I'm authorized by the state to administer emergency psychiatric treatment. Emily backed away. That's not medication. That's what you used to make me forget. That's how you kept me docile for 20 years. Emma, please don't make this difficult. But Emily was no longer the frightened, confused woman Thomas had controlled for so long. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small recording device. Is this making it difficult, Uncle Thomas? She said, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. This device has been recording our entire conversation. Including the part where you admitted to tracking me, to having me medicated against my will, and to Sarah's convenient death. Thomas's mask finally slipped completely. The paternal smile vanished, replaced by cold fury. You clever little bitch. You really think you can threaten me? I think I can destroy you, Emily replied calmly. The same way you destroyed my family. Thomas lunged forward with the syringe, but Jack was ready. He caught Thomas's wrist and twisted hard, sending the syringe skittering across the asphalt. The two men grappled, Jack's construction-hardened muscles giving him an advantage over the older, softer businessmen. Emily, call the police. Jack shouted as he wrestled Thomas to the ground. But Emily was already one step ahead. She pulled out her phone and played a recording. 911, what's your emergency? This is FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, said a woman's voice from the phone speaker. We're in position and have been monitoring this location. Thomas Crane, you're under arrest for the murders of Richard and Patricia Halberg, the kidnapping of Emily Halberg, and the murder of Sarah Brennan. Suddenly, the parking lot filled with unmarked cars and federal agents. Emily had done more than just gather evidence. She'd been working with the FBI for weeks, planning this confrontation down to the last detail. Thomas stopped struggling, realizing he was surrounded. This is entrapment, he snarled. Whatever she told you, she's mentally ill. No one will believe her. Agent Walsh approached, handcuffs ready. Actually, Mr. Crane, we've been investigating you for quite some time. Miss Halberg's testimony just gave us the final pieces we needed. We have financial records, witness statements, and now a recorded confession of sorts. As Thomas was led away, he turned back to Emily one last time. You have no idea what you've done, he said. I protected you. Without me, you're nothing but a damaged little girl with no one left in the world. Emily met his gaze steadily. You're wrong, she said. I have a family now. She looked at Jack, who was nursing a bruised shoulder but smiling with pride. Besides, Emily continued, I was never nothing. I was Emily Halberg, heiress to a fortune built on honest work by parents who loved me. I was a survivor who spent 20 years planning justice. And now, finally, I'm free. As the FBI cars pulled away with their prisoner, Jack put his arm around Emily's shoulders. So what happens now? Emily took a deep breath, looking up at the mountains that surrounded Pine Hollow. Now I go home. To the real Emily Halberg's life. But first, I need to thank the people who showed me what family really means. She turned to Jack with tears in her eyes. A scared, broken girl stumbled into your life in the middle of a storm. You could have just called social services and walked away. Instead, you gave me something Thomas never could, unconditional love and the courage to remember who I really am. Jack smiled, pulling her into a gentle hug. You did that yourself, Emily. We just gave you a safe place to heal. Can we go get Gracie now? Emily asked. I want to tell her that her big sister isn't going anywhere. Coming home. 6 months later, the spring air in Pine Hollow carried the scent of blooming wildflowers and fresh beginnings. Emily sat on the porch swing of Jack's house, their house now, watching Gracie practice cartwheels in the yard while their new golden retriever puppy, Scout, chased after her with boundless enthusiasm. The legal proceedings had moved faster than anyone expected. Thomas Crane had been convicted on multiple charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, embezzlement, and fraud. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. The FBI had recovered most of the stolen money, which had been sitting in offshore accounts for 20 years, accumulating interest. Emily was now officially one of the wealthiest young women in America, but the money felt less important than the life she built in this small mountain town. Penny for your thoughts. Jack said, settling onto the swing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Just thinking about how strange life is, Emily replied, accepting the warm mug gratefully. A year ago, I was running for my life with nothing but the clothes on my back. Now I have more money than I know what to do with, but what makes me happiest is sitting on this porch with my family. Jack smiled. Any regrets about staying in Pine Hollow? You could buy a mansion anywhere in the world. Emily shook her head. I lived in a mansion once. It was beautiful and cold and full of secrets. This place has something no amount of money can buy. What's that? Home, she said simply. Besides, someone has to make sure Gracie grows up knowing she's loved and safe. And someone has to keep her father from falling off any more roofs. Jack laughed. That was one time, and I was distracted because you were down there looking beautiful in my old flannel shirt. One time too many, Emily said, but she was smiling. The engagement ring on her finger caught the afternoon sunlight, a simple band that Jack had picked out himself rather than letting her buy something expensive. Gracie came running up to the porch, breathless and grass-stained. Emily. Did you see my cartwheel? I almost landed it. I saw. You're getting so good at those, Emily said, pulling the little girl up onto the swing between her and Jack. Want to help me with something special? What kind of special? Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out an official-looking document. Well, I was thinking it might be nice if we all had the same last name. What do you think about Emily Monroe? Gracie's eyes went wide. You mean like, adopt you? But aren't you a grown-up? Jack chuckled. It's a little different when grown-ups do it, Bug. It's called marriage. So Emily would be my real sister and my mom? If you'll have me, Emily said, suddenly nervous. She'd faced down killers and corporate criminals, but the opinion of one 9-year-old girl meant more to her than any jury verdict. Gracie threw her arms around Emily's neck. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Can we have the wedding here? In the backyard? Can Scout be the ring bearer? Anything you want, sweetheart, Emily laughed, hugging her back. This is your day too. As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Agent Walsh's car pulled into the driveway. She'd become a friend over the months of testimony and legal proceedings, and Emily had invited her to dinner. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important, Walsh said as she approached the porch. Just planning a wedding, Jack replied. You'll have to come. Emily insists on inviting half the FBI. Walsh smiled. I wouldn't miss it. But actually, I have some news you might be interested in. She pulled out a folder. We found her. Emily's heart skipped. Sarah. Sarah Brennan is alive, Emily. She's been in witness protection for the past year. Thomas told you she was dead to keep you from looking for her, but she actually escaped the night before he planned to kill her. She's been helping us build the case against him. Emily stood up so quickly she nearly dropped her coffee. Where is she? Seattle. She's been asking about you every day since we arrested Thomas. She wants to see you, if you're ready. Emily looked at Jack, who nodded encouragingly. We'll drive up tomorrow, she said. As a family. The next morning, they made the 2-hour drive to Seattle in Jack's newly reliable truck. Emily was nervous in a way she hadn't been since the confrontation with Thomas. Sarah was the closest thing to a mother figure she'd had during her captivity, and Emily wasn't sure what to expect. They met at a small cafe near Pike Place Market. Emily spotted Sarah immediately, older now, grayer, but still the gentle woman who had taught her to read and held her during nightmares. Sarah's eyes filled with tears when she saw Emily walk in with Jack and Gracie. "My dear girl," Sarah whispered, standing to embrace her. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." "You don't have to apologize," Emily said, hugging her tightly. "You protected me as much as you could. You loved me when no one else would. I should have been braver. Should have found a way to get you out sooner." Emily pulled back to look at her. "You were brave. You kept me alive, and you kept me human. That was enough." They spent hours catching up. Sarah had been living under an assumed name, working as a librarian and wondering every day if Emily was safe. She'd contacted the FBI as soon as she learned about Thomas's arrest, desperate to help in any way she could. "What will you do now?" Emily asked as they prepared to leave. Sarah smiled, glancing at Jack and Gracie. "Well, I was thinking Pine Hollow might be a nice place to retire. If you know anyone who might need a grandmother figure around." Gracie perked up immediately. "We do. Emily's getting married and we're gonna be a real family, and Scout needs someone to spoil him while we're at work and school." Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh Emily had heard from her in 20 years. "That sounds perfect." 3 months later, on a perfect September day, Emily Halberg walked down the aisle in Jack Monroe's backyard. She wore her mother's wedding dress, which had been carefully preserved in storage all these years. Sarah stood as her maid of honor, and Gracie was the flower girl. Scout did indeed serve as ring bearer, though he got distracted by a squirrel halfway down the aisle. The guest list was small but meaningful: Ray Turlock and his wife, Agent Walsh and her family, Mrs. Murphy from the general store, and several of Jack's construction crew buddies who had become protective older brothers to Emily over the months. As they exchanged vows, Emily thought about the scared, nameless woman Jack had pulled from that snowstorm. She felt like a completely different person now, not because she'd recovered her memories or her fortune, but because she'd learned what it meant to be truly loved. "Do you, Emily Halberg, take Jack Monroe to be your husband?" the minister asked. "I do," Emily said, looking into Jack's eyes. "For better or worse, in storms and sunshine, for as long as we both shall live." "And do you, Jack Monroe, take Emily Halberg to be your wife?" "I do," Jack replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to love you, protect you, and never let you face the darkness alone. You may kiss the bride." As Jack leaned in to kiss her, Emily heard Gracie whisper loudly to Scout, "This is the part where they become a real family forever and ever." And she was right. That evening, as the reception wound down and the last guests headed home, Emily and Jack sat on their porch swing with Gracie asleep between them and Sarah knitting quietly in the rocking chair nearby. The stars were brilliant above Pine Hollow, unmarred by city lights. "Any regrets?" Jack asked softly. Emily considered the question seriously. She thought about the 5-year-old girl who had lost everything in one terrible night, about the young woman who had spent 2 decades as someone else's prisoner, about the scared amnesia victim who had stumbled into this man's life during a snowstorm. "None," she said finally. "Every terrible thing that happened led me here, to this moment, to this family. I wouldn't change any of it. Even Thomas. Even losing your parents." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "I'll always grieve for my parents, and I'll always carry the scars of what Thomas did. But I've learned something important: we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose what we do next. And I choose this. I choose love over fear, family over fortune, and hope over hatred. Jack pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Mrs. Monroe, you are the strongest person I know." Emily smiled, adjusting Gracie's blanket and watching Sarah's knitting needles flash in the porch light. "I'm not strong because I survived, Jack. I'm strong because I learned to live again." As if summoned by her contentment, Scout padded out onto the porch and settled at their feet with a satisfied grunt. The night was peaceful, full of the small sounds of a world at rest, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, the soft breathing of a sleeping child. For Emily Monroe, formerly Emily Halberg, formerly the lost girl with no name, this was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to hope for. She had found her way home at last, not to a place or a past, but to the people who loved her exactly as she was. The storm that had brought her to Jack's door had long since passed, but its gift remained, a second chance at life, at love, at family. And this time, no one would ever take it away. The end.